Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a permanent route on ridewithgps for submission for RUSA. RUSA permanent routes require you to follow a number of guidelines, so before you make a permanent route it's important to review those guidelines on the RUSA website. You can find them by going to the permanent section, route submission, ridewithgps guidelines. You'll find this very useful list of recommendations for what you should do for your route when submitting a permanent. For those of you who haven't used ridewithgps before, you can find this view here under Route Planner. I'm going to start it at the Rockridge BART station. It's always a good idea to have your start and finish queues near a business or a easily accessible location for people to start. I think starting at a public transit station is a good way to start. So I'm going to start at the Rockridge one. So the Rockridge BART station is right here. So we're going to start the route here on Keith Avenue. I'm going to have it go up the road, and I'll probably fast forward through the section as I do some basic routing. Okay, I've made a basic route. In this route, we're doing a loop, starting at the Rockridge BART station, going out around the Pinole Valley watershed, through the city of Lafayette, back up through Moraga, into the hills of Oakland, and back into downtown Oakland to our starting location. As with any sort of permanent route, as with any sort of brevet route, including permanents, you will need a number of controls. So that riders can show that they followed the route as required. As with most permanent routes that you've seen, your controls will require you to have queue points for them. So here, I will put a control saying that this is control 1. All of your controls should have point of interest, point of interest, as well as queue points. So here, in the queue point, it is just a visual aid for riders to understand where the route goes and where controls might be. The more important thing is to make sure that they are included here on the left in the list of queues so that riders can get notifications on their GPS devices or see them specifically on their queue sheets. So here, the only requirement is a visual reminder to the rider. So I'll save it, so it's saved on the route. But the control on the queue sheet is where all of the information should be. So here again, I will create a control queue and I will say control 1, and then I should include information about this control. Specifically, any control that is a business, you should include the address and the name of the business. So I will put Rockridge BART along with the address. So it's easy to go to Google Maps, find this address, and include it in the control. The guidelines say that zip code is not required. It should be obvious, to a rider how to get to that place if they ask someone. I'm going to leave it here because it's simple. Now, it's behind this other control, which I can choose to delete because that is sort of a weird one from the start. I realize as I'm making this that I actually don't want to go up College Ave to Chabot. I want to go on Keith Avenue. And so if I go to edit my map and move this so that we start directly on Keith Avenue, you'll see that that queue went away. And that's very unfortunate. You don't want that to happen to your route. So it's useful to protect those queue points with these custom control points so that if I move the map here, things before that location don't change. And so any queues that I added will stay there in perpetuity. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to add this custom control. And I will say control 1, or I'll say, in fact, control start, Rockridge BART, along with this address, and save it. The other thing that you should do when you create a custom control, a custom cue point for a control, is that afterwards you should have an instruction of where the person should go. So you'll see here, there's this control, but there's no instruction of what to do after that control. The next instruction we have is this cue on Broadway to turn left. So I'm going to add another custom cue right after the control that says straight. So continue on Keith Ave towards Broadway. And that way a rider knows where they should continue after stopping at that control. It's important to look over your entire route and make sure that Ride with GPS has put you on all of the right roads. So as I go through this process of adding controls, I'm just going to make sure that everything is proper. These things can be a little hard to see, so it's very important to walk your entire route and make sure that Ride with GPS has routed everything properly. For example, here, it wants you to take this detour, which I think is not necessary. And you'll find a number of these things if you routed naively on Ride with GPS that you may want to find. It's important to put a control point at any place where a rider could take a shortcut. Corners like this I find to be useful, or any sort of out and back or spur to your route should have a control on it as well. So I'm going to add a few more controls using the POI feature, and then I'll go back to them and add cues afterwards. So I'll put one here. I'll put another one here where we turn left onto Wildcat Canyon Road. I'll put another one here at the furthest point out on Alhambra Valley Road. Now, you may have a temptation to, like brevet routes that you've made, put the controls in cities or by places where people may stop normally. That is definitely a way to do it. But remember that for permanent routes, people can start and stop them at any point on the route. And, in fact, change the route as is convenient for them, as long as they go the total number of miles and they hit all of the controls. So if you were to put a control, by a grocery store, you're sort of forcing all riders to stop at that grocery store. I personally like to put controls along what I consider to be the features of the routes, the things that I want people to be riding, so that they're forced to ride the roads that I think are pleasant and can make their own choices about where and when to stop in town. For example, if I forced people down this road to go to a specific grocery store, every rider would have to do that. Whereas if I put a little marker on this nice climb on Happy Valley, riders are going to do that anyway and won't have to go out of their way to do it. So I'm going to put a control right here at the top of Happy Valley. Similarly here, we'll want some control along this stretch of Redwood Road. You could put it at this intersection, or you could put it along the road. I'm going to put it near where the entrance to this park is, because people will ride along it anyway and may want to go into the park for water. And then finally, we're going to end up putting an end control here. Because we're making riders come out this way, we have to put a control at the furthest out point of our route so that riders can't shortcut it. So I'll put one here at this intersection with Lakeshore. and then I'll finally put a finish control back at Rockridge. Okay, so now I've put the POIs in here for these controls, but it's important to also add the queues. Similarly, we're going to want to review all of the queues that ridewithgps has made to make sure that there are no extraneous ones or ones that do not provide the proper information. Let's first start by adding the controls for these various, the queues for these various controls. So I'm going to add a custom queue here, control 2, and I should describe where the control is and what the person does. I'm going to make them photo controls for ease of convenience. There are no more info controls per se for permanent routes, but people will want to provide photos if they're not using an electronic proof of passage. So I'm going to say, take a photo of Grizzly Peak and Skyline Boulevard road sign. If possible, it's better to have a more interesting or more specific thing for someone to take a photo of. But in the case that there are no alternatives, a road sign is fine. So here I will include this control, or this queue for this control. Because there's a turn right afterwards, I'm going to leave the queues as they are and not include another queue to say to go straight on this small stretch of road. And as we mentioned before, I'm just going to add a control point before and after this queue, just so if I edit the map, around it, it won't get overwritten. Let's do the same thing for our second control. So for this queue, I want to see if there is a more specific sign that someone could take a picture of. So I've navigated to this intersection on Google Maps Street View, and I noticed that there's not. There's these signs, but they look like they might be temporary, and that would be a bad thing to ask people to take a picture of. So it will be better to ask them to take a picture of this road sign, which I know will be permanent. Again, after this queue, there will be one to turn onto Wildcat Canyon, so I'm going to leave it as is. Now, I've decided that I don't like this control being where it is at control 4, and I'm going to add a little bit of an extra part of the ride here along Bear Creek Road. I'm going to create an out and back along Hampton. Just to this little section where the road changes. So you see there's an out and back here. I'm going to move this control to be over there. So first I will delete this control 4 on Bear Creek Road. Just the point of interest. It will give you this warning, which you'll have to agree to, and I'll create it again over here. So there happens to be a farm that sells farm fresh eggs down this road, and that is where I'm going to put my control. Now, for out and back controls, it will be hard to see where you're adding the queue. Are you adding it before or after this out and back? You see, we go through it. Luckily, you can take the custom queue and add it directly on the elevation map. So if I click on the elevation map, here it will put it in the right place. And I can even highlight this elevation map to have more granularity of before or after that out and back. So I'm going to put it as close to the top as I can. It's important when making these queues to put everything in the notes section. That's what's going to be read to riders as they use a GPS or Ride with GPS's app. And additionally, that's what's going to show up on the queue sheet. Because here we don't have another queue afterwards, so there may be a queue here, I'm going to add a custom queue, just reminding riders to continue on this road. There are a few other things that you'll want to add custom queues for. You may want to add custom queues for places where people can get food along the route, especially on longer routes. You may want to create custom queues for places where people should exercise caution, or there are specific road conditions that they want to be aware of. I want to put a queue here to describe that there is food in Lafayette. Before I do so, I'm going to put down these custom control points just to protect that queue before I make it. And then I'll put a custom queue marker here saying food. I'll say many food options in Lafayette. For more remote places, you may want to say the specific name of the store and whether it's on the right or the left. So you would say 7-Eleven on the right or Burger King on the left. Here, there's a mall with many, many food options, and riders could even backtrack along the length of Mount Diablo Boulevard to find other food sources, so this should be sufficient. Other things that you may want to warn riders about are places where road conditions change. So over here, as we're on El Toyanal, and we go to Wildcat Canyon Road, there's a short section where there's a bridge and some gravel. To figure out where it is, you may want to use Google Maps to see the road conditions. Here you'll see this fence. And that's a good indication of where you may want to create a custom queue for riders. Because this is an embedded Google Maps feature, you'll have to click on this back arrow to get back to the Ride with GPS map. And just to remember where that place is, it's right there. So here I'm going to create another queue. Before I do, I'm going to just protect that area. I'm going to put this custom queue here and say, I'm going to make this one generic because we're describing a few things. So I'll put it as a straight, and it will say, continue around gate onto gravel road. Both to indicate to riders that they will be going around this gate and that in front of it will be gravel. If the road conditions were dangerous or they were entering something that they should be aware of, there's a danger queue as well. So you would use that for something like crossing train tracks, entering a busy road, or roads that are known to have hazards on them. Finally, let's say we've added all of our queues and we have to add our final finish one. We're going to add another control queue here, and we'll say control finish Rockridge BART, the address of Rockridge BART, and then the total amount of time that the rider had. You want to use the ride time calculator available on the RUSA website, linked from the guidelines. So you can go to this calculator and measure the total time that the rider will have. Because we're not riding it at a specific time, we can omit the starting date and time below. We just want to give the permanent distance in kilometers. And here we can either do a conversion or we can ask Ride with GPS to give us the total number of kilometers. And then we'll say how many hours that is here. So we'll say 7 hours or whatever it may be. Or 735 hours. And we'll save that. And that will be the end of our route. Now, you may think at this point that you are done. You've added all of your control point of interests, and you've added all of the queues for your various controls. Before you submit your route, you'll want to review all of your queues to make sure that Ride with GPS has not done anything improper. It has a number of common errors that it has, You want to make sure that they're not there. So let's review the cues and see if we can find any of those common errors. It will take you through them one by one so you can make sure that they're all placed in the right place and that they are correct. And for each one, you're going to confirm or delete it and add it to the cue sheet. You'll get an indication of which ones you've reviewed already. So this is our start control, and it has the address of the Rockridge BART station, so I'm going to keep it. And then we have our other custom queue where we tell people to continue on keys towards Broadway. We're going to go through the rest of these, making sure that they include the direction that the person is turning and the street that they're turning on. So here it says to turn onto K, to Caldecott, onto Tunnel, again onto Tunnel as it continues. You'll notice we have two queues here. So this queue is at the same place as this other queue. Right? Yeah. They're both in the same place. So this one can be deleted. Similarly, we have this one that is in a place where there are no cross streets. It's gotten confused about this trail, and this is a superfluous queue. We can delete this one also. The rider will continue on Tunnel until they get to here. But notice that we were on Tunnel Road, and now we are on Skyline Boulevard. So at some point on this road name changed from Tunnel to Skyline. And it's useful to find the place where that happened and put a custom queue to let riders know that they should continue on the road even though the road name has changed. It happens right around here by this old tunnel cul-de-sac. So I will create a custom straight queue that says continue on Skyline Boulevard. So that riders who are riding will not be confused that the road name has changed from Tunnel to Skyline. We can go back to our review of queues and we'll jump us to the most recent one that we haven't reviewed. This is the custom one that I added, so I'm going to confirm it. I'm going to confirm this control that we made, and then we see right afterwards we have this left onto Grizzly, so the rider knows where they're going after they finish their custom queue. In doing this review, I've realized that even though I have this queue for the gravel, I don't have any indication on the map. So I'm going to create a little point of interest. It says caution, gravel ahead. Just so that riders who are looking over the map will know sections where there are specific conditions. Here we have this generic turn right. It doesn't say what road we're turning on, and it doesn't say why. This is because it routed me through maybe a parking lot, it seems. So in this case, I'm just going to fix it by moving this line to be on this road. And that should fix this queue. As you see, it's no longer there. But there are lots of places where this will happen, on trails or outside of trails and so forth. So we'll want to review queues like that and make sure that we've either updated them to say what road we're turning on or deleted them and making sure that the ones before and after are proper. So here we've turned on to the Moraga Trail. And here we're going to have this sharp left, but it's really a sharp left onto Moraga Road. So turn sharp left onto Moraga Road. So going through this list of queues is going to help you both find errors in your map, make sure that all of the turns are correct and you're staying on all of the right roads, and get rid of things like this, queues that just tell you to turn left. So this is obviously turn left onto Crestmont Drive, and now I've fixed that queue to say the proper thing. You'll want to go through every queue that is in your map before you submit it. It's very important because riders who are riding this who are unfamiliar with the area need to know all of the specific turns that they're making to make sure they're on the right way. You don't want to inconvenience a rider by making them pull out the map while they're on a permanent ride, because that will both get annoying and cost them precious time. Once you've done all of this and you've reviewed all of your queues and made sure that they're right, you have queues for each of your controls, you have point of interest for each of your controls. The queues for your controls say either the business name and the location of them, or what a rider should do there, what they should take a picture of. and you have cues after those controls to indicate to the rider where they should continue, you can submit your ride. So you would go to save this in Ride with GPS. You would name it some name that you think is appropriate. You might add a description here. And then you would save it as a public route, and Ride with GPS will give you a link for it. Then you'll go back to the permanent section on the Ride with GPS website, and you'll go to the route submission section where you can submit a new route. This will take you to a route submission form where you can add the link to your route, include the name, include where it starts and where it ends, add the description that you want to be listed on the RUSA website, along with any notes for the person reviewing it. And then a RUSA team member will review that route and give you notes on it, fix any errors that you have remaining, and approve it when it is ready to be written. So thank you for watching. I hope that this has helped you understand the requirements for creating a route in Ride with GPS for RUSA Permanent. And I look forward to seeing what permanents you create.